Welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to just really sift through this fascinating stack of medical studies, clinical guidelines, and some expert health blogs to find, the ultimate shortcut to being truly well-informed about your longevity.
Yeah, and we have some incredible data to go through for this.
We really do. For you, the listener, we are pulling from a massive 122,000 patient study out of the Cleveland Clinic, which was published in JAMA Network Open. Plus, we've got clinical guidelines on cardiopulmonary exercise testing from the California chapter of the American College of Cardiology.
Right.
And we're also weaving in some really advanced physiological insights from Fitcraft, A3 Health, and the Vitamin Shop blogs.
I mean, the caliber of this data, it fundamentally changes how we view preventative medicine. Like, we are looking at a complete reevaluation of what your standard physiological dashboard should actually be.
Totally. And the core revelation we are exploring today is basically this. Everything we thought we knew about the biggest risks to our lifespan, well, it might be entirely backwards.
Yeah, completely flipped on its head.
Right, because the actual secret to living longer, it isn't a highly marketed superfood or, some niche supplement protocol. It is actually a highly specific set of metabolic and cardiovascular metrics that you can measure. And more importantly, you can heavily manipulate them. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the anchor for this entire paradigm shift is that 2018 Cleveland Clinic study I mentioned. It was led by Dr. Kyle Mansager. And honestly, the sheer scale is what makes these findings undeniable.
Right, because it was, what, over 100,000 people?
Yeah, exactly. They tracked 122,007 patients over a median follow-up of about 8.4 years. But crucially, they didn't rely on self-reported epidemiological surveys where people just guess how much they exercise.
Oh, yeah, people always lie on those. Or, overestimate.
Exactly. Instead, these patients underwent objective, symptom-limited exercise treadmill testing to clinically measure their actual cardiorespiratory fitness. And then the researchers tracked their all-cause mortality over the next decade.
And the hazard ratios they published from that, they are genuinely shocking. Yeah. When comparing patients across different fitness levels, they found that being in the lowest fitness group, so like the bottom 5%, carried a mortality risk 5.04 times higher than being in the elite fitness group.
Which is just a massive number. When you place a hazard ratio of 5.04 next to the traditional big bad risks that always dominate a standard doctor's visit, your entire perspective shifts.
Right, because usually we worry about smoking or cholesterol.
Exactly. In this exact same study population, the hazard ratio for smoking was 1.41.
Wow.
Diabetes was 1.4. Coronary artery disease was 1.29. So low cardiorespiratory fitness is statistically far deadlier than smoking, having diabetes, or even having active heart disease.
That is just wild to me. Being out of shape is literally a stronger predictor of death than a pack-a-day habit.
But we have to look at the underlying mechanism here. Why is a low aerobic capacity acting as such a massive liability at the cellular level? Well, it really comes down to metabolic flexibility and mitochondrial density. When cardiorespiratory fitness is low, the body's ability to efficiently utilize oxygen to create ATP is severely compromised.
Got it.
And that leads to endothelial dysfunction, which is basically where the lining of your blood vessels loses its ability to dilate properly.
Oh, that sounds bad.
Yeah, it creates a whole cascade of systemic inflammation.
Oh.
Conversely, a high fitness level acts as this physiological shield. The researchers actually referenced a massive meta-analysis showing that every single 1-MET increase, which is a metabolic equivalent representing a jump in cardiovascular energy output, well, every 1-MET increase corresponded to an 11 to 17% reduction in all-cause mortality.
That's a huge return on investment.
It really is. That expanded mitochondrial network is actively clearing glucose, it's lowering insulin resistance, and essentially preventing the metabolic syndrome cascade that leads to early mortality.
But wait. I've always heard that extreme exercise can actually be bad for your heart. You constantly see those headlines about marathon runners dropping dead, or there's that cultural myth that you only have a finite number of heartbeats.
Oh yeah, the finite heartbeats theory.
Right, you shouldn't wear your heart out by pushing too hard. How does that fit with this no ceiling data in the study?
What's fascinating here is that the Mansager data explicitly dismantles that myth at a population level.
Yeah.
They specifically looked for an upper limit of benefit.
Yeah, we're trying to find a plateau.
Exactly, a plateau, or a U-curve where mortality risk actually started to increase again due to cardiac overstress, but they found absolutely no evidence of it.
Really? None?
None. The elite group, these are people performing at least 2 standard deviations above the mean for their age and sex, which is roughly the top 2.3% of the population. They had the absolute lowest mortality risk.
So the idea of an excessive wear and tear threshold is just mathematically false in this context?
It is entirely false. And the data held true even for older adults, like those over 70, and even patients with pre-existing hypertension. Having an extreme elite level of fitness was associated with the greatest survival benefit across the board.
Wow.
Yeah, because the elite cardiovascular system possesses this extreme physiological buffer. It can handle massive autonomic stress, regulate blood pressure spikes, and clear metabolic waste rapidly. So it makes them incredibly resilient against acute medical events that would frankly kill a person with low fitness.
Okay, so since cardiorespiratory fitness is this ultimate, unmatched predictor of mortality, we need to talk about how you, the listener, can monitor this day to day. Because before anyone steps into a clinical lab for advanced testing, the sources outline a few highly accessible metrics that paint a remarkably clear picture of your physiological resilience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And starting with your resting heart rate.
Right, because a resting heart rate down in the 40s or 50s, it isn't just an athletic party trick. It represents a massively expanded stroke volume.
Meaning the heart is literally pumping more per beat.
Exactly. The left ventricle of the heart has literally remodeled itself to become larger and stronger. It pushes more blood per contraction, which drastically reduces the sheer mechanical wear and tear on your vascular system over a lifetime.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, the Vitamin Shot blog actually sources a 2024 study demonstrating that even slight chronic elevations in resting heart rate correlate with statistically significant increases in mortality risk. And that's simply because the heart is being forced to work inefficiently 24 hours a day.
Right. And working in tandem with that baseline efficiency is heart rate variability, or HRV, which is a metric that it confuses a lot of people because we intuitively think a heart should beat like a metronome, just perfectly steady.
Right. But we actually want that millisecond variance to be as high as possible.
Exactly.
A high HRV indicates a high degree of vagal tone. The vagus nerve is the main component of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest pathway. So when HRV is high, it means your central nervous system is incredibly flexible.
It's adapting constantly.
Exactly. It's seamlessly toggling back and forth between sympathetic arousal, the stress state, and parasympathetic recovery with every single breath you take.
So HRV is basically like a car's suspension system. Like the more variance it can handle, the better it absorbs the stress of the road. But if it's too rigid, every bump is going to cause structural damage.
That's a perfect analogy. A rigid low HRV means your nervous system is essentially locked in a state of sympathetic overdrive. Your body perceives chronic stress, whether that's from poor sleep, systemic inflammation, or overtraining. It is struggling to adapt to its environment, which is just a massive red flag for long-term physiological breakdown.
Okay, that clarifies HRV so much. But the sources also brought up grip strength as a vital daily metric, which I gotta be honest, feels completely out of place on a cardiovascular dashboard. Like, why grip strength? If I just buy a $25 hand gripper and squeeze it all day while I'm watching TV, am I gonna live to be 100?
Well, no. Squeezing a piece of plastic isn't magically altering your mortality risk.
Right.
Grip strength is highly predictive because it serves as the most reliable, easily measurable proxy for full-body skeletal muscle mass and neuromuscular efficiency.
Oh, okay.
Think about it, testing the absolute force output of your glutes, quads, and back muscles requires specialized, expensive lab equipment. But a simple hand dynamometer gives clinicians an immediate window into your central nervous system's ability to recruit motor units.
So it's really just an indirect measurement of your overall metabolic sync.
Precisely. Skeletal muscle is an endocrine organ. It is the largest storage site for glycogen in the entire body. So if your grip strength is exceptionally high, it strongly correlates to having ample muscle mass overall, which means your body has a massive metabolic sink to dispose of excess glucose.
Which prevents insulin resistance.
Exactly. Furthermore, it indicates a high resistance to sarcopenia, which is the age-related muscle loss that leads to frailty, falls, and then that whole subsequent cascade of health complications that often end in mortality for older populations.
Right? Nobody wants that. So we have this day-to-day dashboard with RHR, HRV, and grip strength. But the Cleveland Clinic proved that to fundamentally outmaneuver mortality, we really need objective clinical data on our aerobic ceiling. We have to look at the gold standard of testing, which is VO2 max, and the cardiopulmonary exercise test, or CPET.
Yes. The CP, it takes us out of the realm of, standard smartwatch algorithms and drops us into clinical reality. It measures the absolute maximum volume of oxygen your mitochondria can consume during exhaustive exercise.
And the A3 Health blog lays out the protocol for this. You are hooked up to a metabolic cart. You're wearing this Top Gun style mask that captures every single exhalation. It measures the precise ratio of oxygen consumed to carbon dioxide produced while you push to absolute volitional exhaustion.
Right, it's intense.
But to get a valid VO2 max, the lab needs objective physiological criteria to prove you actually hit your ceiling rather than just tapping out because your legs hurt.
Right, they can't just take your word for it. The primary indicator is a plateau in oxygen consumption. The machine actively increases the resistance, forcing your body to work harder, but your lungs and cardiovascular system literally physically refuse to uptake any additional oxygen.
You've redlined the if.
You have redlined the engine. And clinicians also track the respiratory exchange ratio, or RER.
That's when you shift from burning fat to burning carbohydrates.
Yes, and the mechanism there is crucial. At lower intensities, fat oxidation fuels your movement. But as you approach your VO2 max, the oxygen demand outstrips the supply, and your body recruits fast-twitch muscle fibers that rely on glycolytic pathways.
The carb-burning pathway.
Exactly. These pathways rapidly burn carbohydrates and produce excessive carbon dioxide as a byproduct. So when your RER crosses 1.10 meaning you are exhaling significantly more CO2 than the O2, you are actually consuming it. It provides biological confirmation that you are operating in a highly anaerobic state and nearing absolute exhaustion.
That is so precise, which is why using the old 220 minus your age formula on a smartwatch to estimate your maximum heart rate seems like buying a one-size-fits-all suit. I mean, it might technically cover you, but it's not going to fit right at all.
Yeah, it's a terrible way to train. A population average formula is mathematically useless for an individual trying to optimize their longevity. I mean, an individual's actual maximum heart rate can deviate by 15 or 20 beats in either direction from that generic equation.
That's a huge margin of error.
It's massive. And if you anchor your entire cardiovascular training protocol to a bad algorithm, you will fundamentally mistrain your metabolic energy systems.
Which brings up the massive debate in the sources, like how you should actually administer this test.
Okay.
Because the A3 Health blog points out that running on a treadmill yields a 5 to 12% higher absolute VO2 max score because running recruits significantly more total muscle mass.
Right.
But then they strongly advocate using a stationary bike ergometer for the vast majority of the population. So if the treadmill gives a higher score, why would anyone choose the bike for this test?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the goal of a CPET is to isolate and measure cardiovascular failure, not biomechanical failure. For anyone who is not a highly trained, specialized runner, the treadmill introduces massive confounding variables.
Like what?
Well, non-runners will almost always fail the test due to peripheral fatigue, so burning quads, joint pain, or deteriorating running mechanics long before they reach central cardiovascular exhaustion.
Oh, I see. Their legs quit before their heart maxes out, which just ruins the data.
Exactly. And beyond the data integrity, there is the practical reality of pushing a human to absolute volitional exhaustion. On a treadmill, exhaustion means risking being thrown off the back of a moving belt.
Yeah, that sounds dangerous.
It is. Plus, heavy head movement compromises the seal on the metabolic mask, which allows room air to leak in and invalidate the breath-by-breath gas exchange data. But on a cycle ergometer, the upper body remains completely stable, the mask seal remains perfect, and exhaustion just means you stop pedaling. Plus, the power output is measured in highly repeatable, standardized watts.
That makes total sense. And the ultimate value of the CP-EAT isn't just getting that final VO2 max number to brag about at parties. It's that the breath-by-breath data identifies your unique physiological thresholds, VT1 and VT2. And these thresholds dictate the exact training zones you need to actively remodel your heart and reverse that mortality risk.
Yeah, the first and second ventilatory thresholds pinpoint the exact heart rates and power outputs where your cellular fuel utilization fundamentally shifts. So VT1 marks the upper limit of your true aerobic base. Below VT1 is your true zone 2.
Which is where you want to spend a lot of time.
Right. Down there, blood lactate remains at baseline levels, fat oxidation is maximized, and you can comfortably hold a continuous conversation. This is the exact intensity that stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis, which is literally increasing the density of the energy powerhouses in your cells.
But the danger zone for most people is the space between VT1 and VT2. The sources call this the gray zone.
Yeah, the gray zone is a trap. It's the trap of chronic autonomic stress without sufficient structural adaptation. The intensity is too high to allow for pure fat oxidation and parasympathetic recovery, meaning you are constantly accumulating fatigue.
Oh, so you're just draining yourself.
Basically, because at the same time, the intensity is too low to trigger the sheer mechanical overload required to stretch the walls of the heart and increase stroke volume. You're generating massive systemic fatigue for a totally minimal physiological return.
So to actually raise your VO2 max ceiling,
Yeah.
you have to do intervals above VT2.
Mhm.
This is that brutal high-intensity territory where lactate accumulates in the blood exponentially faster than your body can clear it.
Exactly.
You are forcing the left ventricle to expand and pump a significantly larger volume of blood with each stroke, which is what fundamentally changes your cardiovascular age.
And the clinical data on how quickly the body responds to this targeted stimulus is actually highly encouraging. For a sedentary adult, initiating a structured program, one that combines high-volume zone 2 with targeted intervals above VT2, the literature demonstrates a 15 to 25% improvement in absolute VO2 max within the first 6 months.
That is a staggering reduction in mortality risk in less than a year.
It really is. Breaking the data down further, achieving a 15 to 16% improvement only requires 16 to 20 weeks of moderate exercise, applied 3 to 5 times a week for just 20 to 45 minutes a session.
That is so doable.
Right. And even for an individual who is already in fair condition, the physiological headroom still allows for a 5 to 10% increase over a 6-month period.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. The A3 Health blog highlighted a statistic about aging that just completely flips conventional wisdom on its head. They noted that 50 to 70% of the age-related decline in VO2 max, that loss of energy and stamina that everyone assumes is just a natural biological consequence of getting older. Well, it is actually entirely attributable to detraining. It's just chronic physical inactivity masking itself as aging.
This raises an important question about our cultural acceptance of physical decline, doesn't it? The California ACC clinical guidelines actually provide compelling evidence against the inevitability of this decay. They document a really cool case study of a 70-year-old female who utilized her CPET data to prepare for a trek to Everest Base Camp.
Wow. But wait, is it ever too late? Like, if someone listening right now is in their 60s or 70s and starting from low fitness, can they actually move the needle? Or is that physiological window kind of closed?
No, the physiological window remains open regardless of age. In the case of the 70-year-old Everest climber, her baseline fitness was already exceptional, yet by rigidly adhering to her precise VT1 and VT2 thresholds, she increased her maximal work capacity by an additional 13.5% over 6 months.
That's incredible at 70.
It is. And the Cleveland Clinic data mirrors this mechanism perfectly. They found the mortality benefits of moving from a low fitness category to a below average or average category were actually most profound in the oldest demographics. Age simply dictates your biological starting point. It does not eliminate your cellular capacity to adapt to a targeted stimulus.
That's so encouraging. But getting the CPE data and knowing the exact science isn't the final hurdle, is it? The Fitcraft sources point out that the real bottleneck for longevity is just human behavior. They identify something called exercise engagement decay as the primary reason these clinical adaptations fail in the real world.
Yeah, because willpower is a highly depletable cognitive resource. The physiological remodeling of the heart and the expansion of the mitochondrial network require multi-year consistency. You just cannot sustain the psychological friction of high-intensity intervals or high-volume zone 2 training through sheer discipline alone.
Right, so Fitcraft argues that you basically have to design a behavioral system that makes consistency intrinsically rewarding, using gamification, variable rewards, progressive micro-challenges, and data streaks intercepts that decay.
Exactly.
Instead of slogging through workouts, fearing early mortality, you are engaging in immediate dopamine loop based on hitting your specific physiological wattages.
Yeah.
You have to lock in the psychology to allow the physiology time to change.
Right, because the precision of the metabolic cart is totally useless if the behavioral protocol fails within 3 weeks. Marrying clinical data with behavioral design is really the only reliable methodology for actually extending the human health span.
Man, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. What the data overwhelmingly shows is that cardiorespiratory fitness isn't just a metric for athletes. It is a vital sign with a heavier impact on your mortality than whether or not you smoke cigarettes. By tracking systemic stress through HRV and resting heart rate, and by securing a clinical VO2 max test on a stationary bike, you abandon the guesswork of generic smartwatch formulas.
Exactly.
You use your exact metabolic thresholds to polarize your training into restorative zone 2 and structural high-intensity work, building a true physiological shield against metabolic disease. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We learned today that 50 to 70% of what we consider cardiovascular aging is actually just a side effect of sitting still. It makes you wonder, if so much of our physical decline is just a choice we're making by default, what other inevitable signs of aging, like cognitive decline, or loss of neuroplasticity, or chronic fatigue, are actually entirely within our power to reverse just by moving our bodies differently? When you look at that dashboard in the doctor's office, maybe it's time we stop staring at the check engine light for cholesterol and start actually pressing the accelerator. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning and stay curious.